The sound of plastic lunch trays clattering echoed through the school cafeteria, but all the noise seemed to fade around 8-year-old Amara as she stood frozen at the front of the line. Her small hands clutched the bright red tray like it was the only thing anchoring her to the earth. She hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. Her stomach growled so loudly she prayed no one else heard. But everyone heard something far worse. No, absolutely not. You don't have any funds in your account, young lady. Put the tray down. The cafeteria worker, Mrs. Clinton, a woman known for her thin lips and thinner patience, spoke loudly enough for the students behind Amara to hear. Heads popped up. Conversations died off. Amara's throat tightened. But I'm really hungry, she whispered, her voice cracking. The woman leaned closer, eyes narrowing. Then maybe your mother should learn to pay your bills on time. A wave of laughter rippled through the line. Amara's ears burned. Her cheeks flushed hot. She felt her heart hammering against her ribs as if it could burst free and run far away from here. Behind her, a group of 6th-grade boys, always the loudest, always the cruelest, snickered. Look! She can't even afford lunch. Maybe she's saving the tray to eat later. Or maybe she eats air. The words hit her like stones. Mrs. Clinton crossed her arms. Step out of line. I don't have time for this today. Amara didn't move. Hunger and humiliation tangled together in her chest, freezing her legs in place. Her lip trembled. Please. I just want the chicken bowl. I haven't. The woman cut her off sharply. I said step aside. A hush moved across the cafeteria, spreading slowly as more kids turned to watch. It felt like the whole room, hundreds of eyes, were staring at one tiny girl who didn't deserve any of this. What no one realized. Not the bullies, not the cafeteria worker, not even Amara, was that someone else was watching. A tall, sharply dressed man stood near the visitors' table at the edge of the cafeteria. His salt and pepper beard trimmed neatly, his expression unreadable, his eyes fixed on the scene unfolding. He looked like he didn't belong in a school. He looked like he belonged in a boardroom, or on the cover of a financial magazine. His name was Daniel Whitford. Worth $4.6 billion. Owner of one of the largest tech foundations in the world. And by a twist of fate, he was here today, anonymous, quiet, observing. But now his jaw tightened. His eyes darkened. Because he had seen enough. Amara finally stepped back from the counter, but only because she couldn't bear to be stared at any longer. The cafeteria worker turned her attention to the next child, as if the humiliation she had just inflicted were nothing more than routine procedure. But Amara didn't move far. She stood a few feet away, staring blankly at her tray. The chicken bowl she wanted sat steaming just inches from her fingertips. She could smell the warm rice, the buttery corn, the seasoned chicken. Her stomach clenched painfully. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be a problem. Mrs. Clinton scoffed. Children like you are always a problem. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Amara blinked rapidly, fighting tears she couldn't afford to shed. Because tears only made the bullies laugh harder. One of the 6th-grade boys leaned in with a mocking grin. Why don't you sit down and watch the rest of us eat? More laughter. More pointing. And that's when Amara's chest collapsed inside. She was hungry. She was tired. She was 8. And she had never felt smaller. If this moment breaks your heart, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Daniel Whitford's fingers curled slowly into fists. His breaths deepened. Something dangerous flickered behind his calm exterior. Because he had seen injustice before. He had lived through his own childhood humiliations. He had clawed his way out of the kind of poverty that left scars invisible to everyone but the ones who carried them. So when he saw this small girl, skin dark, eyes shining with humiliation she didn't deserve, being denied food, something inside him snapped. But he didn't move yet. Not yet. He watched as Amara shuffled toward an empty table, her tray still in hand even though she wasn't allowed to take anything from the line. She placed it down carefully, almost gently, as if it could burst apart with the wrong touch. She sat alone. Her legs dangled off the bench, not even long enough to reach the floor. She stared at the empty tray. Her stomach growled again. This time, a few kids heard it and burst out laughing. Daniel's jaw clenched so tightly a small muscle twitched at the corner. He took a slow step forward. Then another. And another. Until he stood just behind the table where Amara sat, small, shaking, pretending not to cry. He looked at the untouched tray. He looked at the cafeteria worker still gossiping loudly. He looked at the students who felt no shame in mocking a hungry child. Then, in a low voice that carried more power than a shout, he said, "This is unacceptable." And with those three quiet words, everything in the cafeteria stopped. For a long moment, Amara didn't look up. She kept her eyes locked on the empty red tray in front of her as if staring hard enough might magically make food appear. Her fingers traced the raised plastic ridges over and over, a small habit she had developed whenever she was trying not to cry. It wasn't the first time she had been denied a meal. It wasn't even the second. But it was the first time it had happened in front of so many people. Her tiny shoulders curled inward as she tried to shrink into herself, wishing she could disappear under the table. The cafeteria smelled like warm bread and melted cheese and buttery corn, normally smells that brought comfort. Today they felt like insults, reminders of what she couldn't have. Hunger wasn't new to her. Hunger was a companion she had learned to live with quietly. She remembered mornings when her stomach felt like it was folding into itself, and she would tell her mother she just wasn't hungry, so her mom wouldn't feel guilty about not having enough food. She remembered nights when she would hear her mother crying softly in the kitchen after checking the bills. And she remembered days when she would pretend she had eaten lunch just to make everything seem okay. But today the pretending broke. A hot tear escaped and slid down her cheek. She wiped it quickly before anyone could see, but she wasn't fast enough. A girl at a nearby table noticed and whispered to her friend. Both of them looked over with expressions that were not cruel, but not kind either. Pity. And somehow, pity felt worse than laughter. Her stomach rumbled again, louder this time. She pressed her hand against it, willing it to quiet down. The more it growled, the more eyes turned toward her. Her mother always told her, "You are strong, my baby. Stronger than you think." But strength felt like a faraway thing right now. All she could feel was the ache. The ache of hunger. The ache of embarrassment. The ache of not wanting to be a burden to anyone. She heard footsteps approaching but didn't look up. Adults rarely approached her unless something was wrong, and she was already in enough trouble. Maybe the cafeteria worker was coming to scold her again. Maybe a teacher would tell her to throw the tray away. Maybe someone would tell her mother she caused a scene. The fear tightened around her small chest. It was silly, she knew it was silly, but part of her kept expecting someone to grab her arm and drag her out. When you're poor, punishment feels like it hides behind every corner. At home, things weren't cruel, they were just hard. Her mother, Grace, worked 2 jobs. Sometimes 3 if someone offered an extra shift. She always kissed Amara's forehead in the morning, whispering love into her hair before rushing out the door. But exhaustion clung to her like a shadow. She came home late, often long after Amara had fallen asleep on the couch waiting for her. And when the lunch money ran out, Grace didn't even know. She didn't check her emails often. She didn't always have time to read the notices that came home in Amara's backpack. Bills, schedules, overdue reminders. It was all too much, and she was doing her best. Amara never blamed her. She blamed herself. Maybe if she were older, she could help. Maybe if she didn't need so much. Maybe if she didn't eat breakfast, the money would stretch a little further. A soft sting hit her chest as she remembered the morning. Her mother had held her face gently between two rough, tired hands and said, "I'll put money on your lunch account tonight, okay? Today, just tell them Mama's working on it." Amara had nodded. She hadn't expected to be yelled at in front of everyone. She hadn't expected to be shamed. She hadn't expected the whole lunchroom to see her hunger as a personal failure. Her throat tightened again. She blinked hard. She didn't want to cry. Crying made her feel weak. Crying made the bullies smirk. Crying made cafeteria ladies shake their heads and mutter, "Kids these days." She just wanted food. One warm meal. One moment where she didn't feel like she was begging the world for permission to exist. Her stomach growled again, sharp enough that she winced. The footsteps drew closer. She squeezed her eyes shut. Please don't yell at me, she thought. Please don't tell me I'm a problem again. A shadow fell over the table. She slowly, carefully lifted her gaze. And froze. A tall man stood there. He was dressed too nicely for a school. His eyes were sharp but kind, like he saw more than he said. He didn't look annoyed. He didn't look impatient. He looked angry for her. She didn't know this man. But she recognized the expression. It was the same one her mother wore when someone tried to take advantage of her. It was the look of someone who refused to let harm go unanswered. Amara didn't understand why this stranger cared. Adults usually walked past kids like her, pretending not to notice anything at all. But this man didn't walk past. He stopped. Right in front of her. Her heart thumped unevenly. For a moment, she thought he might be here to scold her too. So she straightened her little back, wiped her cheeks, and whispered the only words she could think to say. "I'm sorry. I won't cause any more trouble." The billionaire's face softened instantly. And that softness would change everything. Daniel Whitford had seen enough injustice in his lifetime to recognize the kind that left scars. But something about this small girl. Her trembling hands, her forced apology, the way she tried to shrink herself to make room for others, hit him harder than he expected. He crouched down so he wasn't towering above her. He moved slowly, like someone approaching a frightened animal, not out of pity, but out of respect. "Trouble," he repeated gently. "You haven't caused a single ounce of trouble." Amara blinked, confused. Adults never used that tone with her. Not teachers. Not cafeteria workers. Not the other parents who visited the school. She stared at him cautiously. Are you from the office?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "No. I'm just someone who noticed something very wrong happening." Her little fingers curled against the edge of the tray. She didn't know what to say, so she stayed quiet. Daniel glanced down at the tray, empty, painfully empty, and something in his chest twisted sharply. He had been hungry like this once. A long time ago. A lifetime ago. And he remembered exactly what it felt like to be denied food as if you were undeserving of it. He stood up slowly. And this time, his voice carried. "Excuse me," he called out, loud enough for the cafeteria worker and several teachers to hear. "I believe this young lady needs her lunch." The room shifted again. Heads turned. Conversations died. Even Mrs. Clinton stiffened at the sound of an unfamiliar adult addressing her. The sixth-grade boys stopped laughing. Daniel didn't raise his voice, but the steadiness in it demanded attention. Mrs. Clinton turned around, folding her arms defensively. "Sir, she doesn't have any funds in her account. She can't receive a meal without payment. That's policy." Daniel took a step forward, his gaze sharp as glass. "Policy," he repeated. Is the policy also to humiliate a hungry child in front of her peers? A hush cut through the cafeteria like a blade. Mrs. Clinton's face twisted. I didn't humiliate anyone. You denied her food, Daniel said. And you made a spectacle of it. His tone didn't rise, but every syllable landed with weight. Amara watched him with huge eyes, half terrified, half hopeful. The sixth-grade boys shifted uncomfortably, suddenly unsure if they were still safe behind their cruel jokes. Daniel turned back toward her and offered something no one else had, reassurance. We're going to make sure you eat today, he said softly. I promise. A promise from a stranger shouldn't have meant much. But something in his voice made Amara believe him. For the first time since she stepped into the lunch line, her shoulders loosened just a fraction. Daniel looked around the cafeteria. Is there a principal here? A supervisor? Someone who believes children shouldn't go hungry? The silence said everything. Finally, a young teacher approached nervously. Sir, I'm sure we can sort this out without raising concerns. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Your concern should have been raised the moment you watched this happening. The teacher swallowed hard. Daniel had not planned to reveal who he was today. He had come to this school quietly, without cameras, without staff, just to observe a program his foundation was considering supporting. But now anonymity was no longer an option. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sleek black wallet, not to pay, but to show his identification. The teacher's eyes widened. She recognized the name instantly. Wait, you're Daniel Whitford. A ripple spread across the cafeteria like a shockwave. The cafeteria workers' smirk vanished. The sixth-grade boys suddenly sat up straighter. Even the other adults exchanged uneasy glances. Daniel slid the ID back into his pocket. Yes. And I'd like to know why your system denies children food, especially those who clearly need it. The teacher stammered. We follow district guidelines. Then the district guidelines are broken, Daniel said simply. He turned back to Amara. Come with me, he said gently. You're going to eat. She hesitated, glancing around as if waiting for someone to stop her. But no one did. No one dared. Slowly, she slid out from the bench. Her sneakers squeaked softly against the cafeteria floor. She walked beside him, small and unsure, like a child stepping out of a storm and into something she couldn't yet understand. Daniel didn't touch her. He didn't push or pull. He simply walked with her, matching her pace, matching her height by leaning slightly forward, making sure she didn't feel alone. The entire cafeteria watched them. Some whispering. Some stunned. Some ashamed. And for the first time, the humiliation shifted. It no longer belonged to Amara. It belonged to the people who let this happen. As Amara walked beside Daniel, her steps were tiny, almost hesitant. She kept her gaze on the floor, as though expecting someone to pull her back or scold her for daring to move with this man. The cafeteria eyes burned on her, but Daniel's presence felt like a strange shield, comforting but unfamiliar. When they reached the serving counter again, Mrs. Clinton stiffened, her jaw tight with irritation. Sir, I already explained. Daniel raised a hand, not in aggression but in firm dismissal. You don't need to explain further. A child is hungry. That is the beginning and the end of the matter. Amara swallowed hard and tugged lightly on his sleeve. He looked down. Her voice was barely a whisper. Please don't get mad at them. Daniel blinked, taken off guard. Mad? He repeated softly. She nodded, clutching her tray. When adults get mad, kids get in trouble. And I don't want my mom to get called. Ah. There it was. The fear beneath everything. A fear he knew too well, the fear of punishment for simply needing help. Daniel softened instantly. He lowered his voice, crouching so he could speak at her level. Amara, he said gently, you're not in trouble. And your mother is not in trouble. None of this is your fault. Do you understand? Her eyes darted away. But, they said I was a problem. His heart clenched. They were wrong. She didn't seem convinced. Children like her didn't expect adults to defend them. They expected adults to enforce rules, not challenge them. A deep, shaky breath escaped her. Are you here to punish me? Daniel froze. The question hit him harder than any insult or confrontation could. Punish you? His voice cracked, not with anger, but with heartbreak. No. Never. Her lower lip trembled. Then why are you helping me? He studied her for a moment, this tiny girl who had mastered apologizing to protect herself. A child who had learned to shrink so the world wouldn't notice her. A child who assumed any adult stepping in must be stepping in to discipline. He took another breath and answered honestly. Because no one else did. Her eyes widened, glistening. And because, he added softly, when I was your age, I stood in a lunch line just like you. And someone made me feel small too. Amara stared at him, startled, not just by the confession but by the idea that a man in a tailored coat and polished shoes could ever have been hungry. She opened her mouth to ask more, but Daniel stood up and turned toward the cafeteria worker. His earlier gentleness shifted into something sharper, more controlled. Give her the meal she asked for, he said. Mrs. Clinton hesitated, glancing between them and the other staff. But the account. I will cover every lunch she has ever owed, Daniel said. And every lunch she ever will owe. Gasps filled the cafeteria. Amara's eyes widened in pure panic. She tugged his sleeve again. No. Don't do that, you'll get in trouble. They'll think I asked you. Daniel turned back to her, his expression softening again. No one will think that. And if they do, they can come speak to me. She shook her head, stepping back. But I don't even know you. The room fell quiet. Every sound, from the distant clatter of trays to the murmurs across the tables, seemed to pause. Daniel crouched once more, lowering himself until his eyes were level with hers. That's true, he said gently. You don't know me yet. And that must feel scary. Amara blinked. Her breath trembled. He continued, his tone warm but steady. But right now. I'm someone who sees that you're hungry, and hurting, and treated unfairly. And I won't let that continue. Her eyes filled with tears. She fought desperately to blink away. You sound like a protector, she whispered. Daniel inhaled sharply. A protector. He hadn't heard that word in years, not since he became the kind of man who protected people from a distance, through donations and foundations and policies. Not since he stopped kneeling in front of children and looking them in the eye. But hearing her say it. Something warm, almost painful, stirred in his chest. I'm not here to scare you, he said softly. I'm here to make sure you're okay. Amara looked down, twisting her fingers together. If you're telling the truth, then, thank you. He smiled, small, sincere. I'm telling the truth. And for the first time that day, she believed an adult completely. Mrs. Clinton reluctantly slid the chicken bowl forward. Daniel took it and placed it gently on Amara's tray, as though setting down something precious. Let's get you seated, he said. And then, we're going to make sure this never happens again. Amara still looked scared. But she no longer looked alone. Amara carried her meal with careful hands, as though afraid she might lose it if she blinked too long. Daniel walked beside her, matching her tiny steps with calm, deliberate ones. But the cafeteria had changed. The air felt colder, thicker, as if the humiliation lingering around the room had not loosened its grip. They reached a table near the center of the cafeteria, the same table where she had been sitting alone moments ago. Daniel pulled the bench out slightly for her, not to pamper her but simply to show respect. But as soon as she sat, the whispers began. Why is she sitting with him? Who is that guy? Is he like, a rich person or something? Why is he helping her? Amara ducked her head, cheeks warming again. In her mind, help always came with consequences. She could feel her heart thudding, afraid of what new trouble she might have caused. Daniel ignored the murmurs at first. He focused on her tray. Go ahead, Amara, he said softly. Eat. She hesitated, looking up at him. Is it really okay? Yes, he said. It should have been okay from the beginning. She picked up her fork slowly, lifting the first bite. The warmth of the food rose in soft steam, and her stomach clenched with anticipation. But before she could take the bite, a sharp voice cut through the room. Excuse me, sir. A woman in a beige cardigan strode toward them, arms crossed tightly. She moved with the unmistakable authority of a school administrator who loved being in charge. Daniel turned to face her. Yes. I'm Assistant Principal Hargrove, she said, lifting her chin. And I need to know what you think you're doing. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Feeding a hungry child. A few kids snickered, but most fell silent, sensing a confrontation brewing. That child is not permitted to receive lunch without payment, Hargrove snapped. If we make one exception, we'll have chaos. Daniel stared at her, baffled. Chaos, he repeated. For giving an 8-year-old a meal? It's policy. His jaw tightened, but before he could respond, the 6th-grade boys from earlier chimed in loudly. Maybe he's her sugar daddy. The table burst into cruel laughter. Amara's fork clattered from her hand. Her eyes went wide in shock and embarrassment. Color drained from her face so quickly she looked almost sick. Daniel turned sharply toward the boys. The laughter died instantly. But the damage was done, because now other kids joined in with their own cruel jabs. Why's a rich guy helping her? Maybe she begged him. Maybe he felt sorry for her because she's poor. She probably lied and said she was homeless. Amara squeezed her eyes shut. Tears threatened again. She whispered, please make them stop, please. Daniel's heart twisted painfully. But Hargrove wasn't finished. Regardless of your intentions, sir, you cannot interfere with school policy. You can't just walk in here and give orders. He squared his shoulders. I'm not giving orders. I'm questioning why your first instinct was to shame a child instead of help her. Hargrove bristled. Now listen here. No, Daniel said firmly. You will listen. Gasps rippled through the cafeteria. But Hargrove wasn't a woman who stepped down easily. This child's situation is unfortunate, she said loudly, the word unfortunate dripping with disdain, but we can't bend rules because her mother can't manage her finances. Daniel's eyes sharpened. And telling the entire cafeteria about her mother's finances is appropriate? Hargrove flinched. Mrs. Clinton, standing behind the counter, crossed her arms defensively. We didn't humiliate her, she embarrassed herself by trying to take food she can't pay for. A collective intake of breath swept the cafeteria. Daniel stared at the woman as if seeing her for the first time. You believe a child embarrassed herself, by being hungry? He asked quietly. No one answered. One of the teachers approached nervously. Sir, maybe we can step into the office and talk. No, Daniel said. We'll talk here. The humiliation happened here. The accountability will happen here. Students murmured. Some nodded. Some frowned. Some looked afraid, but not of him. Amara's trembling hand reached for the chicken bowl again. But another voice rang out, from a parent sitting near the window. I don't think outside visitors should interfere with our school system, the woman said. If her family doesn't have money, that's not our problem. A man chimed in, exactly. People need to take responsibility for their own kids. Another parent muttered, maybe if the mother worked harder. Daniel exhaled slowly. The cruelty, the assumptions, the judgment. It was piling higher and higher, rising like a wave threatening to swallow the small girl beside him. And Amara heard every word. Her breathing quickened. Her shoulders shook. Finally, she whispered the sentence that shattered Daniel's composure. I won't eat then. I don't want them to hate me. Her tiny voice cracked like glass. Daniel turned toward her, and saw not just hunger anymore. He saw fear. Deep, conditioned fear. The kind a child shouldn't know. The mocking voices continued around them. Laughter. Sneers. Muttered comments about kids like her. Something inside Daniel, something long buried, ripped open. His throat tightened. His fists curled. And for the first time since stepping into the cafeteria, he raised his voice. Enough. But it wasn't just loud. It was thunder. A silence slammed down over the room so fast it felt like oxygen had been pulled out of the air. The cruelty had peaked. And now, something far stronger was coming. For a long, breathless moment, the cafeteria was frozen. Every student. Every teacher. Every whisper. Every mocking smile. All locked in place by the force of one word. Enough. Daniel's voice echoed against the walls, low, controlled, but carrying the unmistakable edge of a man who had reached his limit. He stepped forward, placing himself squarely between Amara and everyone else. His posture was calm, but his presence was overwhelming, like a storm cloud settling over the room. Let me make one thing very clear, he said, voice firm but steady. This girl has done absolutely nothing wrong. What's wrong is the way she has been treated. A few staff members shifted nervously. Some parents looked away. The sixth-grade boys suddenly found their shoelaces extremely interesting. Amara stared at Daniel's back, stunned. No one had ever stood in front of her before. No one had ever shielded her from anything. Daniel took another step forward. When did we become a place where children are mocked for being hungry? He asked, scanning the cafeteria. When did that become acceptable? Normal? Funny? Silence. His gaze sharpened. Because I have watched adults, fully grown adults, justify humiliating a child as if it were a policy requirement. Hargrove stiffened. Sir, with all due respect. With respect, Daniel cut in, you should have stepped in long before I did. Hargrove's mouth snapped shut. Mrs. Clinton glared defensively. We follow the district rules. If we let one child get a free meal, they'll all expect it. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Good. They should expect it. The cafeteria buzzed, shocked. He continued, children shouldn't worry about being hungry. They shouldn't worry about being punished for things outside their control. And they certainly shouldn't worry about being humiliated by the people entrusted to care for them. He took one step closer to the counter. You denied her food with an audience. He gestured behind him at Amara, not turning fully, but just enough to acknowledge her presence without exposing her further. And then, he said, voice dropping with restrained fury, you made sure everyone heard it. Mrs. Clinton swallowed hard. Daniel wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. His quiet intensity carried more power than any raised voice could. You didn't just deny her lunch, he said. You taught every child watching that poverty is something to mock. That hunger is something to shame. That compassion is optional. He shook his head slowly. That is unacceptable. A ripple of unease passed through the room. A few students nodded subtly. A couple of teachers looked down, embarrassed. Hargrove straightened, attempting to reclaim authority. "Sir, I'm sure we can handle this without disrupting the entire cafeteria." "You already disrupted the entire cafeteria," Daniel replied. "You disrupted this girl's dignity." He turned slightly, just enough for his voice to carry toward the students. "And for those of you who found her humiliation amusing." The 6th grade boys froze. "You need to understand something very important." His voice softened, not gentle, but serious. "Mocking someone for circumstances they can't control doesn't make you powerful. It makes you cowardly." A hush fell so heavy it felt like the room itself was listening. Daniel continued, "Strength is not in laughing at someone weaker. Strength is standing beside them. Protecting them. Making sure they never feel alone." He pointed toward Amara's table, not at her, but at the empty seat beside her. "That seat should have been full," he said. "Of friends. Of adults who care. Of people who refuse to let a child sit alone with an empty tray." Amara's breath hitched. Daniel turned back toward her slowly and crouched beside her again. But this time, he made sure the entire cafeteria watched. "You are not alone," he said softly but clearly. "Not anymore." Her eyes shimmered, wide and disbelieving. He reached out, not to touch her, but to place a hand on the bench beside her, grounding the moment. "You deserve to eat," he told her. "You deserve kindness. You deserve respect. And I will make absolutely sure you receive all three." Her small fingers gripped the edge of the tray, clinging to the words. Daniel rose again and addressed the room with finality. "From this moment on, no child in this school goes hungry. I'll cover every overdue balance. Every future meal. Every child, every day." Gasps. Shock. Relief. Disbelief. A teacher murmured, "All meals. Every student." Daniel nodded. "Every student." Hargrove blanched. You can't just." "I can," he said simply. "And I will." Then he turned back to Amara. "Now," he said gently, "eat your lunch." She lifted her fork again, hands still shaking, but this time not from fear. She brought the bite to her mouth, and the moment she tasted food, her eyes fluttered shut in relief. For the first time today, she felt safe. Protected. Seen. Daniel watched her, and something warm and fierce settled in his chest, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He couldn't explain it yet. But he knew one thing. This was no longer just about a lunch. This was the beginning of something far bigger. The cafeteria felt like it was holding its breath. Amara took another trembling bite of her food, and that simple act, an 8-year-old girl quietly eating her first real meal of the day, felt like the calm before a storm. And the storm was standing right behind her. Daniel straightened to his full height, turning to face the room. He wasn't angry in the loud, reckless way people expected. His anger was calm. Controlled. Deadly precise. He scanned the cafeteria slowly, letting the silence settle like dust. "Before I go any further," he said, voice low but carrying, "I want everyone to look at her." He gestured gently toward Amara, not exposing her face, but directing attention to the small, vulnerable figure hunched over her tray. "Look at how quietly she eats," he continued. "Look at her hands shaking. Look at how afraid she is to take up space." His jaw tightened. "And then ask yourselves why." A few adults shifted guiltily. A handful of students lowered their heads. But several people didn't flinch. They didn't think they did anything wrong. Daniel's eyes locked onto them. "Some of you laughed when she was denied food," he said. "Some of you watched. Some of you joined in." A teacher cleared his throat awkwardly. "Sir, kids can be unkind." "Unkind?" Daniel snapped, turning sharply toward him. They mirrored what they've been taught. The teacher froze. Daniel continued walking slowly through the cafeteria, each step deliberate, controlled. Students parted instinctively, giving him room. "You think children invent cruelty out of nowhere?" he asked. "They learn it. From adults who enforce rules without compassion. From systems designed for convenience, not humanity. From seeing hunger treated as a punishment." He turned toward the sixth-grade boys. "You," he said, pointing to them, not accusingly, but with a weight that made their cheeks redden. "Why did you laugh?" The boys stiffened. Finally, one muttered, We didn't think it mattered." "It mattered to her," Daniel said. "It mattered so deeply that she apologized for being hungry." He didn't yell. He didn't need to. The boys looked away, ashamed. Assistant Principal Hargrove stepped forward again, trying to regain control. "This is not an appropriate forum for this discussion," she insisted. "If you have concerns, you can schedule a meeting." "Oh, there will be a meeting," Daniel interrupted. "But not behind closed doors where issues like this disappear. Not where you can hide problems under paperwork. The discussion will happen here, in the open, because that's where the damage was done." Hargrove's face flushed red. "Sir, I don't appreciate the implication." "I don't appreciate what happened to that child," Daniel said. "Yet here we are." The room buzzed. A father stood up near the back. "Look, I understand emotions are high, but our school follows district guidelines." "Guidelines do not override basic human decency," Daniel shot back. "And even if your guidelines were flawless, your execution was not. A hungry child was humiliated today, and that should never be acceptable." Another parent spoke up, crossing her arms tightly. "But she shouldn't get special treatment just because you're wealthy." Daniel turned toward her. "You think feeding a child is special treatment?" "Well, no, but..." He didn't let her finish. "Let me ask you something," he said calmly. "If it were your child standing at that counter, stomach empty, watching the food being taken away in front of her peers, would you call that special treatment? Or would you call it cruelty?" The woman faltered, mouth opening and closing. Daniel took another slow step forward. "What happened here today wasn't an oversight," he said. "It was a culture. A culture where staff members feel comfortable shaming a child. A culture where other kids laugh at suffering. A culture where adults label a family as irresponsible without knowing anything about their lives." Mrs. Clinton finally snapped. "Look, I don't have time to coddle every kid with a sad story. I run a cafeteria, not a charity." A collective gasp erupted. Daniel turned toward her so sharply she took a step back. "No," he said quietly. "You run a cafeteria in a school. Which means you serve children. Not customers. Not statistics. Children." She opened her mouth, but he continued. "And if you have grown so cold that you can't distinguish between a hungry child and an entitled request, then you should not be anywhere near them." Her face burned crimson. "But I was following policy," she cried. "And what did your humanity say?" he asked. Silence. Daniel looked around again, letting the weight of his question darken the room. "Policies are tools," he said. "Humanity is the duty." Hargrove stepped between them, voice trembling with irritation. "Sir, if you continue undermining my staff..." "Your staff undermined themselves," Daniel said. "You should have intervened the moment a child was mocked in front of you." Hargrove swallowed hard. She knew he was right. Everyone did. But Daniel wasn't finished. He pulled out his phone, not to threaten, not to record, but to emphasize the shift in tone. "My foundation has funded school meal programs in 67 districts," he said. "We help schools create systems that do not punish children for their circumstances. And until today, I was considering adding this school to that list. The cafeteria went dead silent. Daniel looked directly at Hargrove. But now, he said, before a penny goes anywhere, this school will undergo a full audit of its lunch program, disciplinary policies, and staff training. Teachers exchanged panicked glances. Daniel continued, every staff member will be interviewed. Every incident will be reviewed. And every procedure that results in a child going hungry will be rewritten. Hargrove's mouth dropped open. You can't just mandate. I can, Daniel said. And I will. He stepped forward again, his voice turning deceptively soft. And if you're worried about your reputation, know this, nothing that happened here today reflects on the children. It reflects on the adults who failed them. He turned to the room. And that ends now. There was no applause. No cheers. Just stunned silence, the sound of a community forced to confront itself. Daniel returned to Amara's side, his voice softening as he knelt beside her again. Are you okay? He asked. She nodded slowly, though her eyes still shimmered. Did I make things worse? She whispered. He shook his head gently. No. You made them honest. Amara blinked, not fully understanding, but letting the words settle into her. Behind them, the adults murmured in frantic whispers. Plans were shifting. Procedures collapsing. Systems trembling under the weight of accountability they had never expected. And all because of one small girl. Daniel placed a hand on the bench again, not touching her, just anchoring the moment. You are not the problem here, he said softly. You are the reason it's going to get better. Her lips parted in a tiny breath. For the first time, perhaps ever, she felt powerful. Not alone. Not invisible. Powerful. And Daniel felt it too. This was no longer a simple intervention. It had become a battle he refused to walk away from. The cafeteria slowly broke apart into small, stunned clusters, teachers whispering among themselves, students exchanging uncomfortable looks, cafeteria workers pretending to be busier than they were. The storm Daniel unleashed still hung in the air, but its thunder was fading. For the first time since the confrontation began, there was room for something softer. Amara sat quietly, still eating her meal in small, careful bites. Every time her fork touched the tray, it made a soft clink. Tiny, delicate sounds that somehow felt louder now that the room had fallen tense and quiet. Daniel remained beside her, lowering himself onto the bench with a gentleness that surprised even him. He didn't say anything at first. He didn't want to overwhelm her. His presence alone was enough to draw curious glances and murmured questions, but Amara seemed more concerned with something else entirely. She kept sneaking looks at him. Not scared looks. Curious, uncertain ones. Like she was trying to figure out why someone like him would sit beside someone like her. After a few moments, Daniel spoke softly. How's your food? She swallowed her bite and nodded. Good. He smiled. Good. Silence settled again, but not an uncomfortable one. A healing sort of silence. A space for breathing again. After a moment, Amara lowered her fork and whispered, Are you really going to get in trouble for helping me? The question hit him in a way few things ever did. In trouble, he repeated with a small, incredulous smile. No, Amara. Quite the opposite. She looked down at her tray. But the teachers were mad. And the lady in the cardigan. And the lady at the counter. Daniel leaned slightly closer, not enough to overwhelm her, but enough to make sure she felt heard. The adults who were upset, he said gently, were upset because they were being held accountable. Not because of you. None of this is your fault. Her brows scrunched together. But bad things always happen when I talk back. He shook his head. You didn't talk back. She hesitated. It felt like I did. You spoke the truth, he said. And the truth shouldn't get you in trouble. Her little shoulders rose and fell, still unsure. Then, very quietly, she said, "You talk to me like I matter." Daniel froze. Of all the things she could have said. Of all the words she could have chosen. These were the ones that broke him open. He drew in a slow breath, steadying the ache in his chest. "Amara," he said softly, "you matter more than you know." She blinked up at him. "Why? I'm not special." "You are to me," he said before even thinking. She froze. He did too. Those words slipped out too naturally, like they had been waiting for years. Something about her resilience, her soft bravery, her quiet suffering, it had ignited something in him he didn't expect. The protective instincts of a man who had once been a hungry little boy too. She looked away, her voice small. "My mom says I'm special, but she has to say that." Daniel shook his head gently. "I don't have to say anything. But I'm telling you the truth." Her eyes found his again. Searching. Questioning. Hoping. Afraid to hope. "Why did you help me?" she asked, barely audible. Daniel exhaled. He didn't want to give her a rehearsed answer. Or a polished one. She deserved something real. "When I was your age," he began, "I was poor too." Her eyes widened, really widened. "You?" she whispered. "But you wear nice clothes." He smiled softly. "There was a time I didn't." She stared, fascinated. "I grew up hungry," he continued. "There were days I ate nothing but crackers. Days I pretended I wasn't hungry so my mother wouldn't worry. Days I felt invisible, just like you felt today." Amara's breath hitched. She'd never heard an adult talk like this. Never heard someone admit weakness, especially someone important. "What happened to you?" she asked, inching closer. "I got lucky," Daniel said. "And I worked very hard. But I never forgot what it felt like to be small and scared and hungry." She looked down at her tray, then at her hands. "So, you helped me because, you remember?" "Yes," he said simply. "I remember exactly what this feels like." Her lips trembled. "Is that why you yelled at them?" "It wasn't yelling," he corrected gently. "It was protecting." She looked up at him again, really looked. Her eyes softened in a way that made something inside him shift. Children didn't trust easily, not after being let down too many times. But she was opening a door. Slowly. Cautiously. "Thank you," she whispered. He swallowed. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "Protecting you wasn't kindness. It was what you deserved." She fidgeted with her sleeve. Do you have kids?" The question caught him off guard. "No." "Oh." She nodded, thinking. "You talk like a dad." Daniel laughed softly, a warm, quiet sound he hadn't heard from himself in a long time. "Well," he said, "maybe I'd have been a good one." She looked at him again, not as a stranger, not as a billionaire, not as someone out of place in her world. But as someone safe. Someone who saw her. Someone who listened. Someone who cared. And then, so small it almost didn't register, she shifted an inch closer to him on the bench. Not touching him. Just closer. Trusting him. Daniel felt the shift like a weight settling into place. Something had changed. Something important. Something that would matter far beyond this moment. The cafeteria had begun to settle. Students drifted back to half-eaten lunches, teachers huddled in tight, anxious conversations, and administrators whispered furiously near the office doors. But the storm wasn't over. Not even close. Amara had finished most of her meal. She sat straighter now, her face softer, her shoulders less tense. Daniel watched her quietly, letting her eat at her own pace. The calm between them felt earned. But calm rarely lasts. The cafeteria doors burst open with a loud bang, and every head turned. A woman hurried inside, breathing hard, hair slightly undone, work uniform still on. Her eyes scanned the room frantically until they landed on the small girl at the table. Amara. Her voice cracked. Amara froze, fork halfway to her mouth. Mom. The woman rushed forward so quickly she nearly stumbled. She dropped to her knees beside her daughter, pulling Amara into her arms with a desperate fierceness. "Oh baby, oh my God, are you okay?" she whispered, voice trembling. "I came as fast as I could. They called and said there was an incident, said you were involved, I thought." She pulled back, cupping Amara's face, checking for any sign of injury. "Mama, I'm okay," Amara whispered, embarrassed by the crowd watching. "Really?" Her mother exhaled shakily, relief washing over her features, but only for a moment. Then she turned. And saw him. Daniel. A stranger sitting beside her daughter. Well-dressed. Serious. Watchful. Her breath hitched. Her entire posture shifted instantly, protective, suspicious, ready to shield her child from whatever this was. She rose to her feet slowly, standing between them. "Sir," she said, voice tense, "who are you? What happened? Why is my daughter sitting with you?" Amara reached for her mother's hand. "Mama, he helped me." Her mother didn't look convinced. "Helped you how?" She turned sharply toward Daniel. "What happened to my daughter?" Her voice wasn't rude, it was terrified. Daniel stood calmly, giving her space. "Ma'am, my name is Daniel Whitford. I was here today as a visiting observer. I witnessed your daughter being denied lunch." Her mother's face flushed with a mix of shame and anger. "Oh God, oh no," she closed her eyes tightly. I told the office I was going to pay today. I just needed a little more time. I didn't know they were going to." She placed a hand over her mouth, horrified. Amara tugged her sleeve. "Mama, it's okay. I got to eat." Her mother's eyes widened again. They let you eat?" "No," Daniel said gently. "They didn't." Her mother turned toward him slowly. "What?" "I stepped in," he said. She was being humiliated in front of the entire cafeteria. I couldn't allow it to continue. Humiliation. The word hit the mother like a blow. She inhaled sharply and turned to her daughter. "Baby, did someone embarrass you?" Amara looked down. They said I didn't have money." And the lady yelled. And the sixth graders laughed. Her mother covered her eyes with her hand, shoulders shaking. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have known. I should have come sooner. I'm so sorry." "Mama," Amara whispered, touching her arm. "It's not your fault." Daniel stepped forward carefully. Not invading their space, but offering clarity. "Ma'am, none of this is your fault," he said. "What happened today was a failure of compassion. Your daughter did nothing wrong." Her mother straightened, wiping her face quickly. "Sir, you seem kind, but you don't understand. They treat kids like her differently. I've seen it before. I've complained. They don't listen." She swallowed hard. "And we don't have money for lawyers or power." Daniel paused. Then he spoke quietly. "You don't need lawyers or power." She looked at him skeptically. "No offense, sir, but people like us always need those things." Something heavy flickered behind Daniel's eyes. "Mrs. Carter," he said gently, having heard a teacher call her name when she arrived, "you're looking at the wrong person." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "You're assuming I'm on the outside of this problem," he said. "But I'm not." She shook her head, exhausted. I don't understand. Daniel inhaled once, then spoke clearly. My name is Daniel Whitford. Her eyes widened, very slowly. I run the Whitford Foundation, he continued. We fund school nutrition programs across the country. And starting today, we will be funding every lunch in this school, for every student, indefinitely. Her mouth fell open. You're that Mr. Whitford? The billionaire, she asked, stunned. He nodded once. Her knees nearly buckled. Oh my God, she breathed. And you helped my daughter? I protected her, he corrected softly. Because she deserved to be protected. Tears filled her eyes, grateful, overwhelmed, disbelieving tears. She looked at him, then at her daughter, then back at him. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. You don't have to, Daniel said. Just let me fix what should never have happened. And for the first time in a long time. The mother didn't feel powerless. She felt seen. What happened in the cafeteria that afternoon didn't stay in the cafeteria. It didn't stay in the school. It didn't stay in the district. Because change, real change, has a way of rippling outward. And Daniel Whitford had just thrown a stone into still water. The very next morning, before the first student arrived, the cafeteria looked different. Not physically, same tables, same trays, same staff in the same hairnets. But something was off. Quiet. Nervous. Watchful. Mrs. Clinton avoided making eye contact with anyone. Assistant Principal Hargrove arrived early, pacing with a clipboard, trying desperately to appear in control. But nothing could hide the shift. By 8 a.m., a team from the Whitford Foundation arrived, 6 professionals in neat navy suits, carrying tablets and folders. They spoke with calm precision, asking for financial records, program structures, staffing logs. Hargrove blushed under their questions. Clinton stammered. Teachers exchanged anxious looks. Students whispered. Is this because of Amara? Is the school in trouble? Is that man really a billionaire? Did he adopt her? No. But, maybe. The gossip was relentless. But Amara didn't walk into school afraid. For the first time, she walked in with confidence, a tiny spark of it, but real. She held her mother's hand, chin lifted just slightly higher than before. And Daniel? He wasn't there in person that morning. But his impact was everywhere. By the end of the week, the foundation had installed a new meal system, one designed not around money, but dignity. No codes. No account balances. No red flags popping up on screens. No public embarrassment. Every child simply walked to the counter. Picked up a tray. And ate. No exceptions. Hargrove hated the lack of control at first, but parents praised it. Teachers found fewer behavioral issues in hungry students. Even the cafeteria staff noticed something odd. Children were smiling more. And Amara? She finally stood in line like everyone else. The worker behind the counter smiled kindly, awkwardly, but sincerely. Good afternoon, sweetheart, she said. Chicken bowl today? Amara blinked. Sweetheart. No one in the cafeteria had ever called her that before. She nodded shyly. Yes, please. And for the first time, the food was handed to her without hesitation. That simple moment meant more than anyone realized. Though he didn't hover, Daniel didn't disappear. He visited the school a few times a week, sometimes in a suit, sometimes in a simple sweater, but always with the same quiet intensity. The first time he returned, children whispered excitedly. That's him. The millionaire. Billionaire, dummy. Is he here for the lunch thing? Maybe he's here for that girl again. Amara watched him enter the office from down the hallway, her heart fluttering with something complicated. Gratitude, awe, and a hint of disbelief that someone like him still remembered her. Later that afternoon, he found her sitting by herself near the playground fence. She wasn't alone because she was shunned anymore. She was alone because she wasn't used to being invited. "Mind if I join you?" he asked softly. She looked up, blinking. "Okay." He sat beside her on the concrete edge, hands folded loosely. "I wanted to check on you," he said. Her legs swung under the bench. "Why?" "Because I care," he said simply. Her cheeks warmed. "You don't have to." "That's what caring means," he replied. "You don't have to. You just do." She sat quietly for a moment, staring at his shoes, then whispered, "They don't laugh at me anymore." He smiled softly. "Good." "But," she hesitated. "Sometimes I think, they still remember." Daniel nodded. "Memories fade. Change doesn't happen overnight. But you're stronger than you think." She looked at him. "You said that before." "And I'll say it again," he replied. Grace Carter, Amara's mother, had lived years in survival mode. Every day was a juggling act: bills, shifts, childcare, exhaustion. She had forgotten what it felt like to breathe. But Daniel changed that too. One night, she received a phone call from his assistant. "Mrs. Carter, Mr. Whitford would like to assist you with employment opportunities." Grace almost dropped the phone. "Me? Why?" "Because he believes your dedication deserves stability." And stability came. Not charity. Not pity. Opportunity. Within weeks, Grace landed a better-paying job at a local community center funded by the Whitford Foundation. The hours were reliable. The pay came on time. The environment was respectful. For the first time, she didn't need 3 jobs to survive. She needed one. Amara noticed the difference instantly. Her mother slept more. Smiled more. Loved louder. Laughed easier. One night, as they folded laundry together, Grace kissed her daughter's forehead. "You changed our lives, baby," she whispered. Amara shook her head. "Mr. Daniel did." "No," Grace said softly. "He helped. But you made people see what needed to change." Amara didn't fully understand then. But she held the words close. Over the next month, the school changed in ways no one had imagined. Mandatory compassion training. Teachers attended workshops on empathy and childhood trauma. They learned how hunger affects behavior. They learned that shame teaches nothing but fear. Some resisted. Most transformed. A new lunchroom culture. The once stiff cafeteria became warmer. Students chatted more freely. Staff were kinder. Younger students began mimicking phrases they heard from Daniel's trainers. "Are you okay? Do you want to sit with us? You're not alone." It wasn't perfect. But it was better. Consequences. Hargrove remained, but her tone softened about 3 levels. Mrs. Clinton was reassigned to non-student duties after a formal investigation. The 6th grade boys attended empathy counseling and later approached Amara awkwardly to apologize. She accepted, not because she forgot, but because she was growing. He didn't overwhelm her life. He didn't intrude. But he became present. Predictably present. He listened when she talked about her math class. He laughed quietly when she told him she hated broccoli. He remembered the name of her favorite stuffed animal. He even learned her schedule and occasionally left a small note with her teacher. "You're doing great. Don't forget you matter. Hope your day is bright." Amara kept every note in a tiny shoebox under her bed. On one visit, Daniel found her drawing alone at a picnic table. He sat beside her, watching her scribble colorful shapes. "What are you drawing?" he asked. "A protector," she said softly. He swallowed. What does a protector look like? She thought for a moment, tapping her marker against her chin. Someone who stands in front of you when people are mean, she said. Someone who makes the world less scary. Daniel felt something heavy and warm fill his chest. And someone who stays? He asked carefully. She nodded. Yeah. Someone who stays. He didn't trust himself to speak right away. But when he did, his voice was low. I'm not going anywhere. Her smile was small. But real. A month after the incident, the school hosted a New Beginnings Day to celebrate the transformed lunch program. Parents attended. Teachers smiled genuinely, some for the first time in years. Students laughed, taking second helpings of food without stigma. Grace stood beside Daniel as he gave a small speech. Simple. Direct. Humble. But every word carried weight. No child should be hungry. No child should be ashamed. And no child should face the world alone. People clapped. Some cried. But Amara didn't listen to the speech. She watched Daniel. Watched the way he glanced at her occasionally, as if checking to make sure she felt safe. Watched the way he stood tall but never overshadowed her mother. Watched the way he held himself with the calm confidence of someone who had decided, quietly, firmly, that this child mattered. When the ceremony ended, Daniel knelt slightly so he could speak to Amara without towering. Did you like it? He asked. She nodded shyly. Did you feel proud? He asked. She hesitated, then nodded again. A little. You should feel very proud, he said. Her cheeks warmed. Do you think I helped? His voice softened. You started the whole thing. Her small fingers curled around his sleeve for just a moment. A brief touch. A hint of trust. Gone quickly, but meaningful. Daniel felt it long after she let go. Days became weeks. And slowly, the world stopped spinning from that terrible lunchroom moment, only to settle into a better orbit. Amara laughed more. Grace worried less. The school grew kinder. The district took notice. And Daniel found himself returning often, not because he had to. But because something drew him back. Something small. Something brave. Something named Amara. The sun was beginning to set over the school courtyard, painting the concrete in warm gold. The New Beginnings Day crowd had dispersed, families were heading home, and teachers were stacking chairs and unplugging speakers. The air hummed quietly with the soft exhaustion that follows big events. But Amara lingered. She stood near the garden plot the third graders had planted in the spring. A small rectangle of soil now dotted with marigolds and sprouting greens. She held something in her hand, gripping it nervously as she waited. Daniel stepped outside a moment later, coat draped over his arm, tie loosened, the familiar calm in his expression. He spotted her immediately. There you are, he said softly. I was wondering where you disappeared to. She swallowed, rocking on her heels. I wanted to talk to you. Before we go home. Daniel approached slowly, sensing the importance of the moment. Of course. What's on your mind? Amara looked down at her closed hand, then up at him, then back down again. Her voice came out in a whisper. I brought you something. Another beat. I wanted to give it to you before it felt too late. Daniel's brows softened. Too late for what? She didn't answer. Instead, she unfolded her fingers. In her palm lay a small, worn plastic bracelet. Multicolored beads, some chipped, some missing letters. The elastic was stretched, the colors faded. It was clearly old. Precious, in the way only childhood treasures are. Daniel inhaled softly. Is that yours? Amara nodded. My mom gave it to me when I started school. She said it was for bravery. I wear it when I'm scared. He glanced at her wrist, bare now, pale where the bracelet used to sit. But today, she continued, eyes shining, I wasn't scared because of you. Daniel felt something inside him crack, not painfully, but deeply. She held the bracelet out with both hands now, insisting. I want you to have it, she whispered. So you don't forget me. Forget her. The idea alone stunned him. He crouched to her eye level, moving slowly, reverently. Amara, he said gently, I couldn't forget you if I tried. She bit her lip. He looked at the bracelet again, fragile, tiny, yet heavier with meaning than anything he'd been handed in years. Still, he shook his head softly. I can't take your bravery from you. Her voice cracked. But you gave me new bravery. The words hit him like a warm, steadying weight. He reached out and cupped her small hands in his, closing them gently around the bracelet. How about this, he said softly. You keep it, but let me give you something in return. Her eyes blinked wide. What is it? Daniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Something he hadn't planned to give today, but something that suddenly felt meant for this moment. He placed it gently in her palms. Open it. She loosened the drawstring and peeked inside, then gasped. Inside was a silver pendant shaped like a tiny shield, smooth and simple, engraved with one word. Brave. Her breath caught. It's for you, Daniel said. To remind you of what you already are. She held it to her chest, eyes filling. Does this mean you'll still be around? She whispered. He smiled, warm, certain. It means, he said, that I'll be in your life for a very long time. Amara stepped forward and did something she'd never done before. She wrapped her arms around him. A small hug. A quiet hug. But the kind that reaches the deepest parts of a person. Daniel closed his eyes and placed a gentle hand on her back. The symbolic exchange was complete. A bond sealed. A future promised. The car headlights from the school pickup lane stretched long across the pavement as the last families trickled out. The evening air was soft and cool, brushing gently against the marigold garden as Amara and her mother gathered their things. Grace held her daughter's backpack in one hand and the tiny velvet pouch in the other, still stunned by the gift inside. She kept glancing between the pendant and her little girl. Wondering how a single moment in a cafeteria could reshape so much of their lives. Amara walked a few steps ahead, fingers curled around the silver shield at her neck. She kept touching it like she needed to confirm it was real. Daniel stood with them near the school exit, hands tucked in his coat pockets, posture relaxed. Not distant. Not formal. Just present. Grace looked at him with softness in her eyes. Gratitude layered with something deeper, something steadier, something that came after weeks of watching this man care for her daughter without wanting anything in return. I don't know how to thank you, she said quietly. Daniel shook his head. You don't need to thank me any more than you already have. But you changed everything, Grace whispered. For Amara, and for me. I didn't think anyone could walk into our lives and make things better. Not like this. He gave her a small, sincere smile. I didn't walk into your lives. I just stopped walking past. Grace swallowed hard, emotion thick in her throat. Whatever the reason, she said, I'm glad you didn't. Amara turned back to them, her backpack bouncing lightly against her small shoulders. Mama, can he walk with us to the car? Grace hesitated, but only for a heartbeat. Then she nodded. Of course. Amara grinned and reached for Daniel's hand. She didn't grab it. She simply held it open beside hers, waiting to see if he would take the next step. And he did. Gently, carefully, he closed his fingers around her small hand, walking with her toward the parking lot as though it were the most natural thing in the world. They moved slowly, the school building glowing behind them in the evening light. Crickets chirped in the grass. A breeze tugged softly at Amara's braids. She swung their hands a little, shy but joyful. "Mr. Daniel?" she asked. "Yes." "Will the shield keep me brave forever?" He looked down at her, eyes warm. "You were brave long before the shield. It just helps you remember." She nodded thoughtfully. "Do you have something that helps you remember?" Daniel paused. For a long moment, he didn't answer. He looked at her, this small girl who had changed him in ways he hadn't prepared for. Then he spoke softly. "Yes," he said. "I have you." Amara's face lit up, and Grace wiped a tear before it could fall. When they reached the car, Amara turned to hug him again, this time without hesitation, without fear. Daniel knelt so she could wrap her arms around his neck. "Will I see you soon?" she whispered. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "You'll see me," he said, "as often as you want to." A promise. Simple. Strong. And true. Amara climbed into the back seat, still clutching the pendant. Grace buckled her in, then lingered for a moment before closing the door. "She's never trusted anyone this quickly," she said quietly. "I hope you know what that means." Daniel nodded. "I do. And I hope," Grace inhaled, steadying herself, "I hope you plan to stay." He didn't hesitate. "I do." Grace smiled, a soft, grateful smile, and got into the driver's seat. Daniel stepped back as the car pulled away, watching the little girl through the window as she waved until they turned the corner. The night settled around him. Peaceful. Full. Hopeful. Daniel exhaled slowly, a small smile touching his lips. He didn't just step in that day. He stepped into something new. A promise. A purpose. A family he hadn't expected. And somewhere down that quiet evening road, a little girl held a silver shield to her heart. Remembering she was brave. And believing, finally, that she would never face the world alone again.